What am I missing about healthy boundaries?
Welcome to the Real Talk Recovery Podcast with the Therapy Brothers.
We're brothers, we're therapists, and we know recovery.
Bring your stories, your questions, your successes with real recovery.
What am I missing about healthy boundaries?
Awesome question, Brandon. This is maybe one of the most talked about subjects we get in our line of work, and it'll be a good conversation today with some pretty good backdrop. Before we do that, I'm just going to read our review for the week. We're grading a few reviews, and these have been really good, and we appreciate them. So this one says, thank you for the help. This podcast is so helpful in hearing topics about recovery, trauma, betrayal, triggers, and many things that I have had questions about. It's so helpful to hear the perspective of both Tyler and Brandon and those who join them. I appreciate the help this podcast is giving me as I go through the process of my own recovery. Thank you for sharing this precious knowledge and guidance to supplement the work that I'm striving to do. Thank you. Thank you for the review. I'm glad to be helpful. Glad that you're doing the work. The work is worth doing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for those kind words. So, all right. Tyler, you had a big weekend. Your daughter is off. First one has left the nest.
Yeah, so it's one of those kind of like really challenging things because on one hand, you get these weird mix of emotions where on one hand, I'm so excited for her and the opportunities. She's my eldest daughter getting ready to go to college, and we finally dropped her off this weekend. And then on the way home, after we finally dropped her off, my wife and I were just alone in the car and sitting side by side, and we both looked over at each other, and all we could see was our own tears and tears in the other person's eyes. Like just all the memories of the little girl that you raised and the chapter of life that was, and just the challenges that, you face together with her and the work you've done raising her. And it's just one of those kind of snapshot moments, but it's a good time. It's a good time of life. And it's definitely been some change around our house.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think some parents are relieved and just like good riddance. Like
it's
you and Vi are just like sobbing, like, yeah, Just,
I put on a really good game, and I was like staying on the positive side, trying to be mindful, soak up the moment. This is the stage of life we're in. These are good opportunities. Look how great this is. But the dam broke last night finally, and it all came filtering out, which is totally fine too.
It's great. It's grief. Just allow yourself to feel it. You go through different stages of it. So,
there's definitely some stages going on.
Just step into the pain. Feel it.
Yeah, man.
But that's exciting for her, and just knowing her, she's gonna thrive and do awesome, and it'll be good for her to get away from home, I think. So
it'll be really it's an exciting time.
Yeah.
So
well, should we get into the topic?
Yeah, let's get into the topic a little bit, Brandon. You were kind of telling me off air a little bit, just some questions that have come through your practice this week, and maybe that's where we should start.
Yeah, well, if there's one thing that I get the most questions about, it's how do I have healthy boundaries, and what are healthy boundaries, and there's a reason for that, because when you're in a relationship where there's addiction and there's manipulation and there's some gaslighting and all this stuff going on, it gets really confusing and really difficult to know how to show up as a really empowered, authentic individual who has boundaries, who knows where you stop and the other person begins. And if I can give just a little background, Tyler,
Sure.
When I very first started getting trained in treating, actually I was treating codependency and sex addiction at that time. I got trained by a therapist who would, in many ways, do the worst things with couples. She would sit them down at the beginning. So what was happening was couples that had never gone to treatment, he'd get busted looking at porn, or he cheated on her or something. And I say he because 99% of the time that was the case. And they would come into treatment, and they would go to a bishop or a church leader first, and then the church leader would send them to a therapist. And they'd end up with this therapist that I was getting trained by. And she would validate the pain of the partner really, really well. And that was really important, because in that moment, that partner needed to know that her pain, that her having pain, was okay.
Yes. And that she wasn't crazy.
And that she wasn't crazy. And
yes.
And so the partner, it was just like, it was like oxygen to them, of like, oh, like, I'm not crazy. I'm not alone. There is help. And so she would, in a very powerful way, validate the partner, which is important. But then after that validation of the partner, she would then really kind of try to almost emasculate and disempower the betrayer. So the guy who, and what she would do is things like sit them down in a couples session and have a list of all the ways in which the wife is now going to tell him what he has to do in order to be a man in recovery. And I'm talking about things like, my boundary is you have to eat breakfast every day. You have to exercise for 30 minutes. You have to check in with me every day. And in those check-ins, you have to tell me all your lust triggers, every trigger that you have. And that's what we do every single day. And this was about the second or third session that she'd have with the couple. And the wife is feeling like, okay, we got some direction, and good. I'm kind of in fear right now. So this feels good to be able to feel this much control about the situation.
Yes.
And the guy is just full of shame and feeling like, I'm a piece of crap. And like, he's been beating himself up for years and years and years, long before the marriage, because he's been just feeling like I'm a perverted, dirty piece of scum that doesn't deserve love. Right.
Right.
We for years and years and years telling himself that's who he is. So what happens is he doesn't have any bit of a leg to stand on, and because he's betrayed his spouse, and like, you're a screw up. And a professional, a therapist, is there empowering the wife. I take that back. I don't like that word empowering. Supporting the wife in her fear and in her control. And this is the part that, as people are listening right now, they might be thinking like, well, Brandon, it sure sounds like you're kind of siding with him. And and this is kind of the misconception, is if so I watched this therapy happen for a long time. And
you were trained in it.
I was trained in it, and I even did it for a little while, and realized really quickly, this doesn't work. It doesn't work for the individuals, and it doesn't work for the couple. And it really doesn't work for the partner who's been betrayed. It leads them to a place of hopelessness, a place of more fear, a place of more feeling out of control, and not feeling empowered, and not feeling like they are truly stepping into their healthy boundaries. And so when I see these models of, let's empower you to control your partner while he gets weaker so that you can get more strong in your control, that is so far from what healthy boundaries actually are in a relationship. So any thoughts, Tyler?
Yeah, Brandon. So as I'm trying to think of, as you were talking, what our listeners might be hearing and thinking. So I want you to try to just draw the distinction a little bit. And I've got a couple of thoughts on it myself. Is it feels so good to a partner to be told control, control, control. That feels good because life is scary. Life has been upside down. They're confused. They don't have confidence anymore. And yet, if they continue in that pattern, what they will get is more frustration, more fear, more burnout, more of the trauma cycle, which which sounds backwards because that control feels so good, right?
Yeah, but yes, yes. But you're
So
feeling empathy and validation. So, but you're being validated in resonating in fear, and so yeah, it feels good to be connected to. That feels good, but then it creates more and more fear and more control.
right. So you're saying something, and as you're talking about this, this is one of the misconceptions I think first that is always in play when we start talking about boundaries with people and how to set healthy boundaries, is that a healthy boundary is never about actually controlling the other person's behavior. Which sounds
Right.
weird because what we're doing is we're setting up boundaries around other people's behaviors. But when the boundary is that we're controlling somebody else, it actually leaves us in a state of powerlessness, because we ultimately can't take somebody's agency or choice away, even if we dictate to them what they should or can do. Right.
Well, so let me play devil's advocate a little bit, because I totally understand what you're saying. I agree with you, but let me play devil's advocate here. So you're telling me that I'm supposed to just like not worry about what they do, and just like, I guess there's nothing I can do then. Like, thanks for advocating for me, Tyler, as the partner. Appreciate
Right.
it.
That's that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the boundary has to be based off of what I will do if and when the other person does or doesn't do a certain behavior. It's not, the boundary isn't what my partner does. The boundary is my response to what my partner does. I get to maintain control. I get to maintain power over my own choice and my own response. And ultimately, my boundaries have to be set on my value system, not on my partner's behaviors.
Okay, so slow down a second, because you just nailed one of the biggest things, but this flies over a lot of people's heads. So there's certain platforms out there that just speak fear and control and validate that over and over again. And what they don't fully get to is these two truths. One, boundaries are about your value system. So your healthy boundaries are 100% about you. Totally you. Now, your partner or someone else might be doing something around you which is stepping all over your truth, like, and pushing those truths, but they're still about you. And if your boundaries are about attacking the other person, manipulating the other person, controlling the other person, then you're resonating in that fear and control. When you understand what is in your power, what's not in your power, and you're in that reality, you also understand ways in which you can practice self-care, get support, really step into taking care of you. Then you're in a place of love and acceptance. And when you're in that place of love and acceptance, you're going to have the fortitude to do what it takes to be able to live those boundaries, to hold firm to those boundaries, and not get caught in the whirlwind of the fear cycle.
Right, exactly. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples to kind of distinguish this. And you're right, like this is something that I think has been done in a disservice as we've kind of matured as a profession in some ways, is that we've taught the fear cycle, and yet some professionals and some organizations actually perpetuate the fear cycle without meaning to. And so
hang on. There's not without meaning to. There is meaning to. No, let's be honest. There are platforms and professionals out there who keep the fear cycle going because they get something out of it. And they come across as professionals in that they know what they're doing. And so they're very, very convincing. Like, for example, the therapist that trained me, she knows what she's doing. And she has a really, really full practice. And and we get a lot of retreads from her. And we have to do trauma work with those clients because the marriage and the family system is so screwed up now because of the trauma, the therapy-induced trauma that she has inflicted. And she's so convincing, right? And you got to be very cautious because that validation feels so good. But if it's leading you down a road to disconnection from self, God, and others, then it's not, I believe, of God, and it's not leading you to truth, right? So I don't want to give them a pass, Tyler.
Yeah, you're saying that maybe it's being done, whether it's intentional or not, it's being done for their gain rather than for good health.
My experience, and to be honest, and part of me wants to just call them out by name right now, but some of the platforms, some very big platforms out there, are doing it because they have a personal axe to grind, and they haven't done their own work and come to their own peace, and so now they are actually spilling over into other people's lives with their anger, their shame, and their control, and it's leading to them affecting other people's families and things like that. And this is why I get fired up about it, because it's such a it's the irony of it is that what they're doing is so gaslighty and manipulative. Yet they talk about gaslighting and manipulation all the time, right? But it's this. It feels like truth, but it's not, and it's extremely destructive. And so I've tried to kind of subtly battle it, but here's the thing, Tyler. Now you're getting me on my soapbox. When we went from the codependency model to the betrayal trauma model, both these models in treating sex addiction and couples, they suck in many ways. And the reality, Barbara Steffens wrote her book, Your Sexually Addicted Spouse, which basically said, no more codependency. We're done with that, right? Well, and so then it led to this betrayal trauma thing, which has been, betrayal trauma is a real thing. Codependency is a real thing. Both those things are real.
Yes.
Right? But you know where I'm going with this, right? When we went over to the betrayal trauma side, what happened?
We let go of all of the work that you can do on the codependency side of things.
But why should I have to do work? Someone betrayed me. I'm a victim, Tyler.
Exactly. So that's what you're getting at, Brandon, is that you swing from either taking too much accountability by being the codependent in the relationship to having no accountability to being the victim in the situation. And the truth is that there's actually truth in both sides, which is that something has happened to you that shouldn't have happened, that wasn't fair, that wasn't your fault. And that sucks. And that's hard. And it leads to all sorts of that trauma response that actually comes through in the betrayal trauma model, right? And regardless of how and why things happened, the only thing that you have control over, the actual only place to reclaim your life and your freedom is by taking accountability for what you're going to do to respond to those
you
things.
Just let him off the hook. How dare you? He's the one that hurt me. I'm the victim here.
I know.
But Tyler, this is where you and I as therapists in this battle, really, I've gotten many emails that have said, how dare you tell me that I've got to take accountability for me? How dare you tell me that I have to do my own healing work? How dare you tell me that my boundaries are about me, right?
Let's get out of the power struggle of right and wrong and how dare you tell me I have to do this. Let's look at it from the perspective of effectiveness. If I step back and I say, you know what kind of life do I want? What kind of future do I want to have for myself? One pathway is going to lead you down a road that says I'm going to have to wait for my husband or my partner to get better before I can ever be happy. The other pathway says, dang, this really sucks and this is hard, but I'm going to have to make some choices about how I want to live my life and how much I want to put up with and what I want to do. And that one's actually the pathway to more freedom and more liberation and to a happier, better life.
But and here's the thing, and I think this is the crux of it, is that the clients that I work with who really thrive, and they've listened to the platforms and the podcasts about staying the victim, right? They want to take accountability for their own life. They want healing despite what their partner does. They know that they have some pain and some grief, and they're willing to face it and step into it and deal with it and get powerful and say, like, look, I'm not okay with the things that the addiction and things have done to me. Like, that doesn't work for me. But you just kind of nailed it, Tyler. And I'll maybe try to say it just a little different. It's not about who wins. It's not about his side or her side. It's, like, who's right and who's wrong. That's to be honest with you, that's what gets you caught up. This is about healing. And both partners need to heal in some similar ways and some very different ways. And because you're asked to take accountability for your own life and your own healing, it doesn't mean that we're discounting or justifying the betrayal or the hurt or anything like that. We're not saying that at all. But we are saying it's not about he's the bad one and you're the good one, or vice versa. It's not that. This is about moving forward.
That's what we're looking for, is the moving forward part of it. And I want to give you maybe just an example and maybe a personal story to go with this principle here. All right, Brandon. So let's just distinguish healthy boundary versus unhealthy boundary as an example first. Okay. First, the unhealthy boundary is you will be honest with me and you'll check in with every day with me about everything that you've thought, yada, yada, yada. Right.
Right. Right. Okay.
Okay. That's pretty unhealthy.
And we've both had many clients like that.
Yeah. Well, because you're looking for a way to find stability and you're still trying to figure out boundaries yourself and go, okay, well, yeah, I do want something. So
you're feeling unsafe.
Yeah. So the second boundary, which is going to address the same thing, but look at the principle in it, is I deserve to be in a relationship where there's honesty. And if it comes to my attention that there isn't honesty, then I will do X, Y, Z. I'll take some time and space for myself. I'll consider where I'm at, and I may be emotionally or physically disconnected for a while until I can feel safe again. Yeah. It's the same principle we're talking about, but one of them is the control and fear cycle, and one of them is empowering because it allows me to make my choice based off of whether or not this happens. So here's the story. This happened multiple times early on in our own recovery where, I had this kind of tendency to withhold information and to hide things and to maybe not be totally honest, even though I prided myself in being honest, but I'd find ways around it. And it was over stupid stuff, like I'd go and, I'd go and get Chick-fil-A for lunch, but then I'd be ashamed because I got Chick-fil-A because I was supposed to be eating differently. So then I'd hurry and throw the wrappings away. And then my wife would say, "Hey, how was your day?" And I'd tell her how my day was. And she'd say, "Well, what'd you do for lunch?" "Oh, nothing, this and that or the other."
That's lame.
That's way lame. Was way lame, right? But that's the place my head was in, right? Like that was the addicted part of my brain that was still trying to cover up and protect myself, shame-based, all of that stuff.
Not knowing who you are, all that stuff.
So if my wife goes, "Oh, you broke my boundary. I can't believe you broke my boundary," and then she just nags me about it, but does nothing about it, does she empower herself? No.
You mean if she finds out that you lied about Chick-fil-A?
Yeah. So she finds out about it. This is how my wife would handle it. And I think she's been really good at boundaries over the years, is that she would say, "Oh, Tyler, this feels gross to me. It feels like old stuff. It feels like dishonesty. I'm not in for dishonesty. So I'm going to take a break." And she'd leave, and she would leave maybe sometimes for an hour or two. Sometimes it was a day or two. And then at such point we'd connect and communicate again. And eventually we'd come back together, and then she'd be able to say, "Hey, I'm not going to be able to stay long-term in a relationship where there's not honesty." Right. Right. That's her living according to her values, instead of just coming to me back and saying, "Okay, the boundary is you'll be honest."
But Tyler, I gotta say, there's and I think this is one of the hard parts of healthy boundaries. There's a vulnerability in that for her. You might say, "You know what? I want to be dishonest. I am a dishonest dude. I'm going to lie about Chick-fil-A." And in that moment, because it feels easier for her to be able to say, no, I'm just going to control you to be honest. Because if I can just control you to be honest, then I don't risk us getting divorced. And
I don't have to make a decision.
There's no decision. You just get honest and meet my boundary. But what if you come back and you say, no, I'm going to be a dishonest guy. And so, but for her to have healthy boundaries, she has to have that strength within herself to say, either you're going to love me or not love me, but I'm going to show up as me.
And I'm going to keep my values.
This is who I am. I'm going to show up as me, and I'm going to show you who I am, not force you to be who I need you to be.
Right.
Right?
Exactly. Which means this is the hard part, which means that I have to be doing my own work to be in touch with my values, to be in touch with my identity, to be convicted in knowing who I am so that I can then make those choices. And that's
And
where
trust myself.
yeah, and that's where it gets messy, because when you've been betrayed for so long, you get confused. Like there's legitimate reasons why you're feeling a lack of confidence and you feel gaslit, and because it's happened to you. And so the reclamation project, even though it's not fair, has to start from the inside out of getting reconnected to my values, and then learning that my values are worth protecting and that I get to show up the way that I am as I am. And I can either invite that person, my partner, into that space of who I am, or eventually I'll be inviting them out and inviting somebody else in, because I have to stay in touch with who I am first and foremost.
But and Tyler, this is where I think like good therapy and good group work can be essential, which is if I've been like manipulated and lied to and gaslit like crazy, it can really start to wear on my gut feels and my intuition, right? And this is where like the bad groups and the bad therapists really do a lot of damage, because if I go to them in those moments and say, look, like my partner just like blatantly lied to my face, and they're like, okay, like let's get him, like let's control him, like he sucks, he's the worst ever, blah 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 blah. Okay, now I'm being validated and I'm like in that fear cycle, right? Whereas if I go to a group and they say, okay, Brandon, like you're powerful, you are worthy of love, and it's not okay
What they just did is not okay.
That your values are being taken from you like this. This doesn't work for you. We can feel it from you. We can feel your emotions, and your emotions are telling you something about you. So who are you? And I'd say, well, I need honesty. I need honesty in my relationship. That's who I am. Okay? And your group would say, or your therapist would say, how are you gonna step up for yourself to fight for honesty?
Yes.
Right. And that's where I would say, well, I do this. I'd communicate to my partner this way and let him know that didn't work for me. I do my self-care this way, and maybe they'll come around and say, you know what, like I'm going to make that right. Like I care about you valuing honesty in our relationship. And but can you see the difference?
I see the difference 100%. It is, again, it's working from the inside out with your own power. And I love what you just described, is that's the benefit of having the right kind of team too, is a good group or a good therapist or a good coach or somebody isn't going to just go on the witch hunt. They're going to go on more of the empowerment play of like, okay, how do you stay in contact with your best values, and what do you need to do for yourself to protect those things?
Absolutely.
Right. And it's okay. Everyone can be frustrated. I think people go into their groups and we're like, I can't believe this happened again. He's such a da-da-da-da-da. It's like, okay, yeah, we're gonna vent that for a minute. We'll validate that. And because it's true, because the feeling behind it is valid too.
We're going to validate that like crazy, but then we're going to bring it back to your own accountability for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's where we're not trying to take sides here. We're actually trying. You said something to me years ago, Tyler. I was working with a spouse who just could not get out of the fear cycle and was trying to control her husband and trying to control. And I was kind of consulting with you a little bit, and you said, you know what you need to say to her is that, look, I am fighting for you. Like, let's put him aside. Let's like, whatever. He's whatever. He's out there. But I care about you, and I care about your well-being, and I am fighting for you. And I see that you're caught up in this fear cycle and you're spinning. So what's some other options? Like, let's help you not feel this suffering anymore. But what's so hard about that, Tyler, is what?
Well, number one, it does come across as not being validating sometimes, and it still is then that same place of not being fair, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, but the truth is, and I've had this happen in my office many times myself, is that I get that, geez, why are you letting him off the hook, or why are you being so? It's like, it's not about him. 100%, it's not about him. it's about you and your heart. And you can only really say that unless only if there's a relationship of trust that's been established first, because otherwise it lands on a heart and mind that's wounded enough that says, oh no, this is just another man trying to be,
right, trying to assert himself. All the trauma comes up.
Right. But let's go back all the way to the beginning of our episode for a second, Brandon. Let's look at the reasons why people end up in treatment in the first place is often because they desperately are looking for a way to find safety, security, and healing. And most of the time they want to save their marriage.
Yeah.
Right. So if I want to save my marriage, I need to ask myself what kind of a marriage I want to be in. And I would submit that most people don't want to be in a marriage where they're 100% in control and dominating the marriage. Most people want to be in a marriage where they know that they're an equal to their partner and that their partner is choosing in to who they are. And so the overall goal here is to actually get two individuals doing their own individual work to become their best selves and to choose in with each other because they know each other, they know their values, and they become equals instead of facilitating a relationship where one person is going to be in a one down position the rest of their eternity.
Tyler, your point you're making right now is really important. I was talking last week to a therapist, and she was saying, with couples work, we might be focusing on the wrong thing. We focus on attachment, on like meeting bids for connection. And she said, realistically, long-term healthy relationships are actually about really healthy individual self-realization. And so where my wife feels empowered to be her and just to explore who she is and understand herself, because I'm there as a safe place for her. But you know what? I'm only safe because I'm honest about who I am. And I know where I stop and where she begins. We are individuals. And because we're individuals, our intimacy, our love, our connection can be so deep and so big because first and foremost, we are who we are, right?
Exactly. And I think that's the beauty of like what a really good marriage is it's two individuals who are doing that kind of work, who know where they begin and the other stops, and then who open the doors into a choice to give part of myself to that relationship, knowing that the other person is going to be doing their work and that we have enough values that overlap with each other and that we agree on so that we can have that connection that we're all looking for. And if we do it one way or the other, it doesn't work, where it's like two individuals who are just individuals and we're just going to be on our own. That doesn't work because then we're lonely, we're miserable. But if we get too enmeshed with each other and we don't see where the one person begins and the other ends, then it gets too confusing. And then we're taking things personally. And that's where like that codependency part of the model comes back in, where it's really not healthy for a long-term relationship with one another.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we could give some examples of like, let's say my partner wants to go get a full-time job, right? And we got a bunch of kids at home and I'm working a full-time job and I'm like, I don't know, like, what are we going to do about that? How are we going to take care of all the kids? Okay. But let's say she's like, and this is totally made up, but let's say that she's like, I feel strongly in my truth that I need to go back to work. Okay. So, but I feel strongly in my truth that we need to have a parent home for the kids. Right.
Right.
So now we're at conflict. My value is that my kids have support and connection from a parent more often than she wants, right? So, but this, Tyler, is if I just go along with, yeah, I'm gonna smile and just be like, yeah, go back to work. I'm perfectly fine with it.
You're not okay. You're not being authentic.
I'm not being boundaried. I'm not being honest. Yeah. When I say boundaried, I mean authentic, right? Mm-hmm. If she's like, okay, I can't go back to work because you're telling me that I can't, and like, yeah, you're guilt tripping me here to not go back to work. So I'm just going to resent you and resent my life and just keep taking care of the kids all day long, right? Not being boundaried, right?
Right. That's not authentic. So what you're basically saying, Brandon, if I hear you right, is that you're advocating that it's okay to have healthy tension and stress between those two sort of values while you both discuss how to try to find a middle ground there.
That's where the beauty of a really healthy relationship exists, is in that tension. Is thank you, partner, for showing up as you. I'm now showing up as me. So now let's talk about how both of our values can be met here. What are some options? Is there any compromise? Maybe not. So if there's not compromise, what are some other options? What else can we do to try to meet both of our needs here? And in that moment, if we can communicate that way, we're both going to feel seen and we're both going to feel loved. But if we don't communicate our honest truth in the first place, we're just going to feel controlled and resentful toward each other.
Right. And I think where you're going to is that the way that honest truth gets conveyed is also important. Where, if she comes home and says, no, I really do, I need to go to work, this is what I got to do. And I go, well, my truth is that you shouldn't. Nope, that's not necessarily going to be conducive to a good conversation. What we should be doing is finding the values in it first and being curious with it, and then sharing our feelings.
My truth is that you shouldn't is controlling.
Yeah.
Versus like, man, I value time, or like our kids having time with you. Like that's really important to me.
Yeah.
That just being honest with you, that's where I'm at. So like, let's talk, let's work this out. Right.
Right.
So, Tyler, we could go on and on and on about boundaries, and maybe we need to do like a little mini series about different nuances of boundaries.
Yeah, we should.
There's internal boundaries, there's external boundaries. But I would just say, if you're feeling that validation in your groups, and just really gut check your truth about, does this feel like it's leading to a place of creating love and freedom and moving forward, or does this feel like we're groveling in a pit of victim and despair and fear and control? And as convincing as they may sound, really ask yourself that question.
Yes, and that's basically the overall kind of tone that I think we've had for our meeting today, Brandon, is when I'm looking at healthy boundaries, exactly what you just said, but am I basing them off of true principles? And is the response based in my choices instead of the other's behaviors?
Are you ending up empowered?
Yes.
All right, Tyler, you're the man. You guys, we'd love, maybe we'll get some negative reviews on this one. I don't know. I hope not.
I hope not too.
But we would hope for some good reviews, you guys. We really love your feedback, whatever you would like to share with us. And thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to go subscribe to our podcast, Real Talk Recovery, or the Therapy Bros podcast over on iTunes.
If people are having questions or even take exception to some of the things we say on the show, we would love to have you come on as a guest. It just makes it better for everybody. So if you're interested in being a guest, go to therapybros.com, and right at the very top, it says ask a question. Click the button, it'll walk you right through.
All right. See you guys.